In the early 90s, when 16-bit gaming was hitting its stride, Super Castlevania IV emerged as a tour de force, blending gothic horror with action platforming mastery. Released for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1991, this game wasn't just another entry in the already beloved Castlevania series, it was a reimagining that set new standards for the franchise and the genre as a whole. Developed and published by Konami, Super Castlevania IV served as both a remake and a reinterpretation of the original Castlevania game, which had first whipped its way into our hearts on the NES back in 1986. The game put players back in the boots of the iconic vampire hunter, Simon Belmont, who is once again tasked with the mission of vanquishing the evil Count Dracula. But this time around, Simon was armed with an arsenal of new abilities, and the game featured a host of technological advancements that took full advantage of the SNES hardware. From the very first moment players stepped into the eerie forests of Transylvania, it was clear that this wasn't just a mere upgrade, it was a full-blown reimagining that pushed the boundaries of what a 2D platformer could be. At its core, Super Castlevania IV is a love letter to classic horror, drawing inspiration from a wide array of sources. From Bram Stoker's Dracula to Hollywood monster flicks of the 1930s and 40s. But what truly set it apart was its ability to innovate while staying true to the essence of what made the Castlevania series so beloved. With its meticulously crafted levels, tight controls, and unforgettable moments, Super Castlevania IV didn't just stand out in the crowded field of platformers, it helped define what the genre could be in the 16-bit era. So whether you're cracking the whip for the first time or revisiting this classic with nostalgia-tinted glasses, Super Castlevania IV is a game that continues to captivate and challenge, reminding us why it's often regarded as one of the finest entries in the Castlevania series and one of the greatest games of its time. At the heart of Super Castlevania lies a timeless tale of good versus evil, set in a world steeped in gothic horror and ancient curses. The story may not be complex by today's standards, but its simplicity is part of what makes it so enduring and effective. The game follows Simon Belmont, a member of the legendary Belmont clan, a family of vampire hunters who have dedicated their lives to vanquishing Dracula, the Prince of Darkness. As with many tales of classic horror, the plot is driven by an age-old prophecy. Every 100 years, when the forces of good weaken, Dracula rises from his grave to spread terror across the land, plunging the world into darkness. Unlike some of the later entries in the Castlevania series, Super Castlevania doesn't bog down the player with extensive lore or dialogue. Instead, it allows the atmosphere and gameplay to tell the story. Each level represents a new chapter in Simon's perilous journey to Dracula's castle, with the environments themselves narrating the tale of his struggle. From the decaying forests and haunted ruins to the treacherous caverns and towering castle spires, every stage is a step closer to the final confrontation with Dracula, each more perilous than the last. The story of Super Castlevania may be straightforward, but it is this simplicity that gives it its power. It taps into the primal fears and timeless themes that have driven horror stories for centuries, battling the forces of darkness, the hero's lonely quest, and the never-ending cycle of good versus evil. In doing so, it creates a narrative experience that is as much about mood and atmosphere as it is about the journey itself. This combination of classic storytelling and atmospheric design is what makes Super Castlevania not just a game, but a legendary tale that continues to resonate with players more than 3 decades after its release. When it comes to gameplay, Super Castlevania is where the series truly came into its own, offering a rich and refined experience that built on its predecessors, while introducing a slew of innovations that set a new standard for the genre. At its core, the game is a side-scrolling action platformer, but the attention to detail and the tight, responsive controls elevate it far beyond your average run-and-jump affair. One of the most significant enhancements in Super Castlevania is the expanded control over Simon Belmont's whip, the vampire killer. Unlike previous games in the series where the whip was limited to horizontal strikes, Super Castlevania allows players to whip in 8 different directions. This simple yet game-changing mechanic adds a new layer of strategy to combat, giving players greater control over how they approach enemies and obstacles. Whether you're taking out a bat swooping in from above or lashing at skeletons on the ground, this 360-degree whip control provides a fluidity that was unmatched at the time. But the whip isn't just for combat. Simon can now use the whip to latch onto rings and swing across gaps, adding a dynamic element to the platforming. This mechanic, while seemingly straightforward, is employed with increasing complexity throughout the game, requiring precise timing and control as players advance through the more challenging levels. Super Castlevania features a diverse array of monsters, each requiring different strategies to defeat, from the relentless Medusa heads that snake through the air to the imposing armored knights that block your path. Every encounter tests your reflexes and understanding of the game's mechanics. The game's difficulty ramps up gradually, ensuring that players are always challenged but never overwhelmed, though it does demand patience and precision, especially in the later stages. The controls in Super Castlevania are tight and responsive, which is crucial given the game's difficulty. Simon's movements are deliberately paced, giving the character a sense of weight and momentum that feels grounded and realistic. The difficulty curve is well balanced, offering a challenge that feels rewarding rather than punishing. The game requires skill and persistence, but with each death, players learn a bit more about the level design and enemy patterns, making progress feel earned. By the time you reach the final showdown with Dracula, you've truly earned your place as a master vampire hunter. Overall, Super Castlevania is a masterclass in gameplay design, combining tight controls, innovative mechanics, and challenging yet fair level design to create an experience that stands the test of time. The enhancements introduced in this game not only refine the Castlevania formula, but also influenced countless other platformers that followed. Whether you're whipping your way through hordes of monsters or carefully navigating the treacherous castle environments, the gameplay in Super Castlevania Eve remains as engaging and satisfying today as it was back in 1991. In the realm of 16-bit gaming, Super Castlevania stands as a shining example of how to use a console's capabilities to create an immersive and atmospheric experience. The game's graphics and sound design work in perfect harmony to draw players into its dark, gothic world, making every moment spent in Dracula's domain feel like a journey through a classic horror movie. The art direction is richly detailed, with each level boasting a distinct visual style that contributes to the game's eerie atmosphere. From the mist-covered forests and decrepit graveyards to the opulent yet decaying interiors of Dracula's castle, every environment is meticulously designed to evoke a sense of dread and foreboding. The character sprites are equally impressive, with Simon Belmont and his monstrous foes rendered in intricate detail. Simon's animations are smooth and fluid, giving a sense of weight and realism to his movements. The way his whip cracks, the way he crouches or climbs every action is animated with care, making the controls feel responsive and intuitive. One of the standout features of Super Castlevania is its use of the Super NES's Mode 7 graphics capabilities. Mode 7 allows for the scaling and rotation of backgrounds, and Konami used this technology to create some truly jaw-dropping effects. The most famous example is the rotating room in the castle's interior, where the entire background spins around Simon as he makes his way through the level. This effect was groundbreaking at the time, and remains one of the most iconic moments in the game. Now, let's talk about the sound design, which is just as critical to the game's atmosphere as the visuals. Super Castlevania features one of the most celebrated soundtracks in video game history, composed by Masanori Adachi and Taro Kudo. The music is a mix of haunting melodies, driving rhythms, and orchestral grandeur that perfectly complements the game's gothic setting. Each track is meticulously crafted to match the mood of the levels, from the somber tones of the opening theme to the intense, pulse-pounding beats of the boss battles. The soundtrack not only sets the tone for each stage, but also enhances the emotional weight of Simon's journey, making every victory and defeat feel that much more impactful. One of the most impressive aspects of Super Castlevania's sound design is how it uses audio cues to signal important gameplay moments. For example, the shift in music as you approach a boss fight serves as a warning, heightening the sense of danger and anticipation. The subtle changes in sound as you move from one environment to another also help to guide players, creating a seamless and cohesive experience that feels both natural and immersive. The graphics and sound are integral to what makes the game such a memorable and iconic entry in the series. The detailed visuals, innovative use of Mode 7, and the masterful soundtrack all work together to create an atmosphere that is both haunting and captivating. Even decades after its release, the game's presentation remains a benchmark for how to use graphics and sound to enhance storytelling and gameplay, proving that Super Castlevania is not just a great game, but a timeless piece of art in the world of video games. At the time of its release, Super Castlevania was hailed as a technical marvel. Critics and players alike praised its use of the SNES's hardware capabilities, particularly the innovative Mode 7 graphics that allowed for the impressive rotational effects and smooth scrolling backgrounds. The game's fluid animations, detailed sprites, and haunting soundtrack were all cited as high points that set it apart from other platformers of the time. It wasn't just about the technology. Super Castlevania was recognized for its impeccable level design, tight controls, and the balance of challenge and accessibility that made it both a rewarding experience for veterans of the series and a perfect entry point for newcomers. The game's reception was overwhelmingly positive, with many publications awarding it top marks and accolades. It quickly became a must-have title for SNES owners, cementing its place as one of the defining games of the early 90s. But beyond the immediate success, Super Castlevania has endured as a classic, with its reputation only growing stronger over time. As new generations of gamers have discovered it through re-releases and emulation, the game has consistently been recognized as a masterpiece of game design. In terms of cultural impact, Super Castlevania has left a lasting impression on the gaming community. It is frequently cited in discussions of the greatest games of all time, and its influence can be seen in the wave of modern indie games that draw inspiration from classic 2D platformers. The game's visuals, music, and gameplay mechanics have been referenced, reinterpreted, and celebrated in everything from fan art and remixes to full-blown homages in other games. The legacy of Super Castlevania is one of lasting influence and enduring acclaim. It's a game that not only defined what a Castlevania game could be, but also set a high bar for the entire action platformer genre. Its blend of innovative gameplay, atmospheric presentation, and technical prowess has ensured that it remains a beloved classic, cherished by those who played it at launch and discovered by new fans decades later. As long as there are gamers who appreciate tight controls, challenging gameplay, and a hauntingly beautiful world to explore, Super Castlevania will continue to be celebrated as one of the true greats of the gaming world. Thank you for joining us. If you like this deep dive into the retro world of Super Castlevania, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep questing and keep gaming.